Well, we're back on Speed Street, as my co-host Joey Molinaro would normally say. But this is Connor Daly here. Joey is a father now, so we want to congratulate him. Him and his wife have had their baby boy. And yeah, Joey's doing that's obviously more important than podcasting. So Joey is doing his thing, doing his fatherly duties, which I'm sure his wife appreciates because I think your first mistake. I don't have any children. I don't know about what that is like, but I assume you have a baby, and the next day you shouldn't be talking about motorsport on a podcast. I assume that there's more to be focused on, but again, not an experienced father or father at all. So I'm here with producer Ben. We are going to dive into a bit of a Portland, a little bit of a Portland preview. We'll talk about the Dale Jr. download that I was on last week, or this week, and maybe get into a little bit of Daytona, and obviously an Indy 500 driver of the week. But Ben, how are you doing, pal? It's great to see you in person at the Dale Jr. download, the Bojangles studio.
Yeah, no, that was great. That was a lot of fun to get to catch up. And I guess this is the second time we got to meet in person. So yeah, it was great having you. I thought the episode was awesome. I just got done listening to it this morning after class. So I think you did a great job. What did you think of the whole experience? If you just want to dive right into talking with Dale and Mike.
Yeah, no, I think it was a lot of fun. I really respect, honestly, when I listened to that show, and obviously Dale, I've met Dale in person before, several times, but realistically, we haven't communicated a ton, in person. And when you look at the people who've been on that show, it's really cool. It's a lot of big names in the sport, big names from the history of the sport. And so, I felt a very special, feeling going in there, and the studio is awesome. Obviously, I mean, the studio, look, there are people filming you the whole time. There's stuff going on there. I mean, it's incredible. So I enjoyed it, and definitely go have a listen to it. We've got a lot of incredible, help from Dale and Mike, promoting this podcast, and they've done a lot for us. I it's funny to see read some of the Twitter comments about it, and the Instagram comments sometimes, because I know a lot of the fan base that podcast I'm sure has might not be as familiar with the IndyCar world, right? And that's kind of what we're here for, to maybe help out. And there are some people that are like, "Yeah, we don't care about IndyCar." It's like, well, you know what? The point of this podcast is actually to help you know that we can care about all motorsport if you want. And yeah, it was great. Great conversation. That was probably the deepest interview, or the deepest that I've ever really gone about my entire career. And it's funny because leaving there were still some things that I feel like I missed talking about. And I was like, oh man, like that would have been a funny story to tell, or oh, we could have got into that. But for the most part, I mean, that was a long interview, and they got into the thick of it for sure. I mean, what did you think? Did you even know anything about me, Ben? Did you learn anything about me there?
I mean, I think just filling in a lot of the gaps and just giving a straight timeline was super interesting. I think just even for me, I followed you kind of sparingly ever since you came over and kind of did the IndyCar stuff, and kind of you jumping around and, fighting tooth and nail for your opportunities and everything. So I think that was super cool. Just to have give me one baseline to tell me everything. And, there's plenty more to write. So about what you got going on. So
It's funny, man. I went back like in my kind of conversations with Dale, like in our text messaging, and oddly enough, like in 2020 during the whole pandemic, I was trying to get him into the LCQ league, which we kind of talked about in the download a little bit there. But at one point, he had sent me like four like really extremely long text messages describing a video game that he was playing during the pandemic, and I was like, oh, that's cool. Like it was like a war game that I had not heard of before, but like Dale was big into it and he wanted me to get on there. And I was like, I probably should have got on. I didn't actually ever download the game, but I was like, man, Dale was big into this the video game scene during the pandemic, as most of us were.
I mean, that's one thing that surprised me. He'll talk about a lot, especially with iRacing, what he's done there. But like, he's a huge gamer. Like, even
Oh
back in the
yeah,
day when he was still racing, he was always talking about how you'd go up in the hauler and play Xbox or PlayStation or whatever. So yeah, that
which I
doesn't surprise
respect.
me. Oh yeah,
I-
absolutely. You gotta pass the time and gotta have some fun. But yeah,
exactly,
that's
because
that's one thing I didn't really expect to come out of him. But
yeah, yeah, because I mean, we're all gamers. I was a big gamer. I mean, still am. Um, for those who have followed my Twitch stream as well over the last couple of years, it's been dormant lately, which I do apologize for. But technology has punched me directly in the face, and I can't really figure out my computer's upstairs currently. So the Twitch stream is on pause until I get a more experienced technological user of the computers to help me out. So it was fun. Definitely go listen to it. Dale Jr. download. Obviously, if you're listening to this, you probably already know the Dale Jr. download, but it was cool to see some responses. It's obviously a really long interview, so the responses are kind of slowly trickling in, but very very cool and just appreciative of the folks that want to check it out. And it's life has been a wild ride for sure, and obviously, Joey has been such a great part of this program as well, and we even Joey, Joey's had quite a ride himself on how how he's got to where he is. Everyone's got a unique ride, you know what I mean, and it's just a matter of what you do in certain situations and how you pursue through the tougher times. But yeah, definitely go over there to check it out. It's very exciting. But as we kind of get back into our own podcast, we have Portland coming up this weekend on the IndyCar schedule. The final two races are going on in these next 2 weeks, back to back on the west side of the United States. Portland, there were a couple of people who tested there last week. I heard the track was quite fast. Portland for me is a racetrack that I never raced on growing up, and the first time I had actually raced there, I was substitute driving for Marcus Ericsson, oddly enough, for the McLaren team, which was Aero SPM McLaren something back then, 2019. Qualified like in the top 10, I think, really well. First time out there was awesome to be in that position. And then a very unique part about Portland, for those who don't know, and there was a NASCAR Xfinity race there this year that was quite chaotic, because Portland has a very fast straight, front straight, and then into a very, very heavy braking zone and a chicane. And usually very, very difficult to get all of our cars through a first lap chicane. So it's always very exciting. I was wiped out in a massive accident the first race I ever did at Portland. And then last year, whenever I raced at Portland, there was another big first corner schmozzle, big kind of wild craziness going on. And again, it's a track that there's a lot of chaos to be created there. But hopefully we can take advantage of that. I think it's the same tire as the Indy GP, which is good for us because obviously we were fast the Indy GP. And we hope that certainly for our case, we hope that it's a high grip scenario, because in the high grip scenarios we do a little bit better. So we'll see what happens. It's always good to get back out to the West Coast. Very very excited, and also it's an NBC race, so definitely tune in to the Big Bird this weekend. A little NBC action. And yeah, I mean, I'm excited for it only because it's just nice to get back racing. And we love weekends off. I had a wonderful weekend off, but getting back racing is awesome. And the end of the season is sad. It is, but the championship battle for IndyCar in general is super exciting. And I can't wait for it. Ben, who do you think your pick is for the championship? Who are you going to go with?
man, I mean, still top four separate by 17 points. I mean, it
Yep.
doesn't really get much better than that going into it. I mean, you guys kind of talked about it last week with Joseph Newgarden. I don't really know if you can. I want to go with him. I mean, 3 points. That's nothing. But man, I mean, it's gonna be hard to beat him. I like Will Power, and like obviously he's gonna qualify well. But I think if you need a guy to close it out, I got to go Joseph. Like that's got to be me. But I mean, Scott Dixon, you know how sneaky he can be.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's very interesting because at Portland, it's so dangerous. That first chicane is just so, you could qualify great, but imagine, one guy from the third row, even like who you wouldn't expect to be wrecking, but you try to, it's so wide entering that chicane that all of a sudden, you had Dixon and Palou at the back of the field after the first chicane. Because if you cut the chicane, which I think they might change the rules for that this year, but if you cut the chicane, you don't actually go around the physical racetrack in the track limits of the real racetrack. You have to go to the back of the field, which is, I mean, to be honest, I did not like it because I had to go off the track last year. Like literally, if I would have stayed on the track, well, we're in the wreck and we're not there. So you have to kind of go where you can go. And it caused us to go from having a decent start to being in the back. And no one wants to be there because again, it's hard to pass at Portland. It's not super easy. But yeah, those championship competitors, they're just going to be thinking about one thing: qualify up front and avoid the turn one mishaps. And after that, it's kind of more, then it's more set in stone on what you got to do. But it's a very interesting track to have with two races left. And almost it's similar with Laguna Seca as well, because Laguna Seca, that first corner in Laguna Seca, very, very tight hairpin. There could be a little chaos there as well. But for some reason, Portland is wildly inviting to see mass chaos. So I'm excited to see what happens. I think, the championship is nowhere near over. I think Scott McLaughlin, although his chance is slightly more far away, if he has two great, he's been very, very consistent. I think if he gets a win at Portland, it'll be really interesting. I'm thinking Scott might win Portland and have a wildly closer mathematic chance at winning the championship at Laguna. But again, it's going to be hard to beat Joseph. I see multiple scenarios. I see, okay, yeah, how can you beat Joseph right now? Scott's on a heater as well, but also Scott Dixon is Scott Dixon. So that's what makes IndyCar so exciting right now. And I'm just excited to see what happens. It's two great races. And when you look at the championship as well, not to just kind of keep rambling on, but if you look at our championship, right, and then I saw the point spread for the Formula One championship right now, and I looked at it and I thought it was a joke. I thought it was like there's how many points separating first and second in the driver's championship? It's unbelievable. Like I know they still have plenty of races left, but you might as well hand Max Verstappen the trophy already. Like it's crazy. They're just past the halfway point in their season. And you might as well, the championship might as well be over. And that I find is astounding.
I mean, the amount of memes I've seen that everybody's like, well, they're going to start Max a lap down, and then that'll at least give the field some competition. But I mean, you give the guy an engine penalty, start at the back, and I mean, he's just going to win it anyway. So
yeah,
Red Bull, man, I don't know.
It's and again, Formula One is great. Like I love Formula One. We're potentially we could have a guest next week who has been in Formula One, who has had some experience, who is still very involved in that world. We won't tell you who it is yet in case he bails on us, but very, very excited for the potential of that. It's just a different world. And again, there's been a lot of comparison this week as well. I just responded to a tweet today about the super license point system because there's a lot of talk about Colton Herta and potentially Red Bull, which is a very interesting topic. I thought that was not what I was expecting. That is what you call left field, because if there's one group who has not been a fan of American drivers over the last 20 years or whatever it is since Scott Speed being a Red Bull Formula One driver, it's Red Bull. Like they've been so anti-American, and suddenly, recently, you've got, I think there's a young kid as well named Jack Crawford, who's a Red Bull driver, kind of coming through the F3 scene. You've got this talk about Colton Herta, which honestly, that would be awesome. Like Colton Herta showing up to AlphaTauri, I think that's a great place to start. You see Gasly doing well there, and Gasly, a great friend of mine. I think that would be a great starting point as long as he gets a fair shot. Like that's all we want.
Right.
But very, very interesting situation there. But the super license points thing, someone had brought it up, and to read a comparison of what this absolute bologna sandwich is absurd. I actually it made me mad because you read, obviously, for those who don't know about the super license point system, it's been developed so basically a driver can't necessarily just go to Formula One, right? Like, let's say you had the richest kid in the world, and he did some racing, he finished races, but the guy doesn't deserve to be in Formula One. But as we see in motorsport, money can get you anywhere. And so they did it was a good system to do because we don't want to necessarily, we want to see the best in Formula One. But yeah, each series is ranked at a different tier, right? So if you finish a certain in the top 3 of F2, you get a certain amount of points towards your super license. If you finish in the top 3 of F3, you get a certain amount of points towards your super license, and so on and so forth. And there's right now, Chris Medland, F1, tweeted this. Chris is a great guy. And because there's a Motorsport Magazine article that said Colton Herta is once again being touted or tooted. Touted. It's got to be touted. I don't know what that word means. Yeah. Definitely not tooted because that's farting for F1. But despite being a multiple IndyCar race winner, he doesn't have super license points to make the Grand Prix switch. And so the article is basically about the FIA needing to address the situation to help top U.S. talent. And the tweet was this isn't about American drivers, but more how IndyCar itself is ranked. 5 drivers in title contention with 2 races to go, and one that finishes 4th in the championship will get the same number of super license points as the driver finishing 4th in FRACA, which is, I don't even know what that is. Formula Renault Eastern European Championship. I have no idea what it is, but it's lower than F3.
I thought the comparison was to F3.
No. This is to a series below F3.
Oh,
yeah. So, I mean, just reading that, it's the stupidest thing I've ever read. Like, like, how can you sit in an office and say, well, you know what? If we're going to try to rank drivers and we're going to try to give them points to maybe get in Formula One, we're going to have basically every series that's not in America good, everyone else bad. It's like, what do you, how, it's just, it hurts my brain because if you don't see that, you're so lost. Like, it's IndyCar. This is not, we're not Formula 3. We're not some support series. Like, we have drivers who have super licenses. Like we have some of the best drivers, I believe, in the world right now. And I just, it's astounding. And there wasn't a lot of negative response to that because honestly, I think even the most diehard F1 fans have to look at that and be like, yeah, that's probably a little bit nuts. So I hope there is a fix to that because it's just not fair. And again, we don't like to throw out the fair and not fair type, scenarios, but it's just factually not fair. And I think it's absurd.
Yeah, you can't compare F1 or the super license and take IndyCar kind of out of the equation with guys that, like you said, had super license, ran in Formula One, ran in other top forms of motorsports, and come to IndyCar and is still really competitive. That's I don't understand that.
Yeah, it's one of those things that it's so. As someone who has lived over there, again, we talked about this several times, but it's so typical and it's sad. But again, I love Formula One. Like I will still fight for Formula One. I love the attention that it's got because it is truly a fantastic world championship. It is, the best of the best. I saw some interesting questions posed to the young drivers in F2 recently as well. Logan Sargent being one of them, the American, and they love to try to ask questions to like tier the series. You know what I mean? Like, they said, oh, like, would you like? I don't know what the question was, but it was basically trying to compare Formula One to IndyCar yet again. Which again, why? What's the point in asking these young guys like, hey, would you rather go to Formula One over IndyCar? Of course, you're going to say yeah for at first, but I think to try to get them to throw out a quote about like how, oh yeah, well, Formula One's better than IndyCar. It's like, why? Like, it's like, yeah, of course we would all want to go to Formula One, but also guess what? IndyCar right now is one of the most competitive championships in the world. And thankfully, Logan, I read the first quote that I saw Logan say. Again, I don't know him, but I was like, oh, he better not be starting to go down that European route of throwing shade at IndyCar. And he did say it was quite a competitive championship, so that's good. But I was getting ready to dump him off the train of support, but we still support this young American guy for sure.
So with the American versus European racing styles and Colton kind of being with McLaren and going to do the F1 test, is that something that like Colton himself, like, is he really pushing to try to get that? Is it something that he's like the opportunity to go try the F1 Europe stuff? Is that coming to him? Like, what's kind of your thoughts on that?
Um, I would say Colton has a good group of people around him, and obviously his dad, like Brian Herta, I would say is one of the smartest people that I've interacted with. Brian is very very intelligent, and so he's definitely got good management folks around him. He's got great sponsorship support, obviously with Gamebridge and everyone there. They're such a great group of people, and they they want to support their guy, right, Colton, and Colton is right now everyone kind of knows that Colton's hot right now. You know what I mean? He's a hot talent. And you got to get, you got to put those guys in the right position. It's kind of like I would almost compare it. It's kind of got an interesting vibe, like a really good football player, right? Like let's say you've got, you know, someone, a wide receiver in the NFL who is, shining like crazy, right? And that team obviously wants to keep him, but obviously any other team's going to try to, get him in, but he's got to be paid correctly, right? So, Colton also is in a situation where, he's got to go to the best possible opportunity for his future, right? But if it's Formula One, again, you don't want to go to Haas right now. You know what I mean? It's tough to see there being any positive, for certainly if Colton goes there, all he does is get criticized. You know what I mean? All he does is get trashed because that team's doing, it's they've had a tough year. But if you go to AlphaTauri, that's a situation where it's like, all right, like that would be great. But again, there's so many drivers out there as well that are also going for the same seat that it's going to be just really interesting to see. But I think Colton's got that. There's something about the aura around him right now where it's like there's so much chatter about him and like where he goes that I think it's like, oh, do we need him too? You know what I mean? And it's kind of cool. Like it's good for him. And I think no matter what, if Colton has to stay in IndyCar next year, which it's looking less likely, but if he has to stay in IndyCar next year, I mean, boom, you're talking championship competitor right out the gate, I think. And again, he's gonna be in a good place no matter what.
Yeah. I mean, if you're going to send one guy from IndyCar to F1 and he's an American, I think he's got to be the guy that you point out. And it'd be interesting to see how that transition goes because from my recollection, I remember somebody that's goes into IndyCar and kind of up through the ranks and then transfers over to F1. So I'm excited.
Yeah, exactly. It hasn't happened. It's been one of those things that IndyCar has not been a launch platform for anyone to get to F1. So not in the last few years, you know what I mean? Which is fantastic for our racing series and fantastic for, I think, motorsport in general. And the interesting thing is that we talked about this on the Dale Jr. download as well, about Colton, obviously, but I would say I would love to see if we're talking just pure American talent getting a shot in Formula One. I mean, there's no one I think with a better mental fortitude and a better dedication to what he does than Josef Newgarden. And I think Josef Newgarden, although he's older than I am, he's in his 30s, right? Josef would be one of those guys that could also step into that Formula One role and I truly believe do a good job. And he's very, very professional and he's very, very dedicated to his craft at the highest level. So I don't want to ever ever take away anything from potentially, Joe, because Joseph lived that dream too. Joseph did more racing in Europe than Colton has. Well, Colton used to race in Europe as well, but like Joseph did, a solid year, 2 years in Europe, trying to be a racing driver over there as well. And so everyone had the Formula One dream at one point. But I truly believe he has developed into one of the most talented drivers for sure on the IndyCar circuit, but someone who would make us proud as a country in Formula Uno.
I agree. So I don't know. We'll see how it plays in the next few months. I mean, we still got two more IndyCar races. I guess transitioning over to back to North American racing, talking about Daytona this past weekend.
Oh yeah, the race that never wanted to happen.
Right, we got an Xfinity race that went until like 1 o'clock in the morning. Jeremy Clements wins that, and then he gets his win encumbered, taken away, whatever. We got the Cup race that was rain delayed, and then man, I don't even know where to start with that. But
yeah,
let's maybe just to jump ahead with that, the whole because I mean, I guess IndyCar experiences this racing in the rain on the road courses. Just the whole, the big wreck that happened towards the end of the race. There's about 20 laps left. There's pretty much rain in the area. I mean, the broadcast was showing it the entire time. You could see the dark clouds literally just funneling around the track, and it's Florida in the middle of the summer, so it's not really completely unheard of. And all the spotters are on the radio saying, "Hey, rain's coming, rain's coming, rain's coming." Cars go through the tri-oval. A couple guys say, "Hey, I think it's raining." They go into turn 1 and 2. Boom, half the field gets wiped out. Well, I mean, as a driver, Connor, are you just? I mean, most of them were fuming, but like, is there anything they could have done differently in your opinion? I mean, trying to even maybe throw the caution before that.
I mean, honestly, that is a big that was not good. Like when I saw that, I was like, oh no, like that's the ultimate nightmare because we had a very similar situation in Gateway, like our last race. I mean, we saw the rain clouds coming. You see everything happening. But it's and sometimes race control gets criticized for like throwing the yellow too early, like, oh well, now that you threw the yellow, now it's going to rain. But people, I think often, I think that was actually a great example of why we don't race on ovals in the rain, and how quickly that change of grip can happen. Because again, you see all day those guys pounding around the oval, doing a bunch of miles an hour, 200 miles an hour. And you think, oh, well, that's easy, or it doesn't look like it's a lot, but like those cars are still on the limit of control. You know what I mean? And you see the rain just a little sprinkle, right? But when you decrease the track grip and you make it a slightly slipperier surface at 200 miles an hour with a bunch of cars all together, that's exactly what happens. You just go straight in the wall because that's it. It's you can't lose the grip on the surface, and I think it just goes to show how close everyone is to the limit. And like at Gateway, as soon as there was a raindrop, boom, yellow, and it has to be that way. And people have to have their head on a swivel because, again, you cannot send open wheel race cars or closed wheel race cars on an oval at high speeds into a rainy corner. It's just literally because, again, there's no runoff, so you just go straight in the wall. And it was just and that was a big accident too. Like there was no soft impacts there. Like
no,
the wall still feels the same if it's a little slippery or not. It still hurts. So that was a real shame to see. And it obviously took a lot of guys out of contention because you put in the work all day. You put in the work all day to try to be there for the win. And we see that in NASCAR all the time, obviously with some tough, heartbreaking finishes for guys that, just get wiped up in someone else's accident. But realistically, that was no one's accident. That was the weather. That like NASCAR, I do believe has to take responsibility on that one and be like, yikes, we should have been a little bit more proactive. Right. And again, every decision is going to have its consequences, right? Even if you're proactive and it doesn't rain, there are people who are like, well, why did it happen? Well, it's like, it's for reasons like that. You don't want guys getting hurt. And the first way to get someone hurt is to just fire them off into the wall in a rainy situation at 200 miles an hour. So tough call for everyone for sure. But again, those guys are racing until it goes yellow, because if let's, if it does go yellow and the race gets called, the leader is the winner at that time. So no one's going to lift until you throw a yellow. And that's, we saw the result of that for sure.
Yeah, and with everything on the line too, with it being the cutoff race, they were kind of monitoring the Blaney and Truex battle for that last spot. And then eventually, if there's a new winner that came in, which eventually did happen with Austin Dillon, he got through the wreck and made it through. I mean, they had to get that race back going. I mean, I think it was a 2 or 3 hour red flag or something like that. Like, I think they knew they're like, okay, we have to get this going because we can't end the playoffs like this and how it just happened. So I think they did
Yeah.
admit it at some point with they're like, hey, we'll sacrifice, X amount of time to get this race finished. And then it kind of had that wonky finish with 5 cars running or whatever. But
Yeah. I mean, let's that finish. I mean, goodness gracious.
yeah.
I saw Tyler Reddick crash like 3 times, I thought, and he's still running
Yep.
second. Like it
Yeah.
was
Things
crazy to
pretty
see.
good.
Yeah. And again, a lot of those guys, that finish in the top 10, let's say the Landon Castles, the David Reagans, the BJ McLeods, like those guys, right? That's what they're racing there for. You know what I mean?
Right.
Like those situations. Cause again, it could easily get to a scenario where 25, 30 cars are involved in accidents, 40 cars. I mean, there's not even 40 cars in the race, but like there could be almost 30 cars out of a 38 car field that are in an accident, right? And if you happen to keep your nose clean all day, the race still pays the same for the top 10. You know what I mean? Like
right.
just because all those guys crash doesn't mean that there's less prize money to be made. And that's a big day for those teams, for those cars. Huge day for people who gambled on NASCAR as well. Apparently,
I was just gonna say, yeah, the
craziest
3 or 4
thing I've ever
parlay
seen.
that one guy did. I think he won. I saw somebody won just under $1 million,
$1 million,
I think, and then somebody got like
70 grand,
like 70 grand. That's what it was. Yeah. So that's just,
I
what,
mean,
you got to
but
take
that's
chances.
the thing, right? Because
Why
again,
not?
if yeah, exactly. The odds were so crazy for all those guys finishing in the top 10, right? You're talking guys who are in, let's just flat out slower cars, right? The cars that are never going to be up there for the win. But at Daytona, you keep your nose clean, keep 4 wheels underneath you. You have all those guys finishing in the top 10. You could literally, again, these bets that people were making were $10 or like $13.
Yeah,
You're like, yeah, I'll risk.
Yeah.
You could do that, every weekend for 3 years, and you're like, yeah, it's fine. It's just $10. But my gosh, to win $1 million, that guy, like,
unreal.
I bet the NASCAR betting scene is astounding for certainly the next super speedway race.
Oh, for sure.
But for all the rest of the races, I mean, you're going to have people picking the wildest lineups of all time, just thinking, hey, because the odds are insane, right? It's never going to happen like that. It might not happen like that for another 15 years for those guys all finish in the top 10.
I mean, 13.50. That's just a Chick-fil-A order, large fry and a milkshake. Like I can wait on a couple of those to do that. So, but hey, our friend of the program, Noah Gragson, gets a top 5 in his race. So I think that was a career best for him. So
I mean, and to get to Xfinity as well, like Xfinity was kind of the same situation, right? Like it's crazy rain. That poor Daytona having to deal with all that rain. Honestly, that's really brutal
every year, man.
It's sad to see. And as having a president of a racetrack in my family, Doug Bowles, I know how hard it is on the track employees, on the people trying to put on the event. Everyone wants to get it going, like everyone does. But our boy Sage Karam finishing in the top 5.
Yep.
Awesome to see as well. And again, everyone was wrecked in that race too. You know what I mean? Every single person was wrecked. But you had guys like boom, JJ Yaley, Timmy Hill, like Timmy Hill pushing Jeremy Clements for the win. Like, it was great to see. But I bet what Timmy's saying now, he's like, well, Jeremy got DQ'd. You know what I mean?
Where's my win?
Yeah, exactly.
Which that whole thing, I don't really understand, but that's a whole other can of worms.
Yeah, I mean, my gosh, there was so much that happened over the weekend in NASCAR. Just like, I mean, Jeremy Clements winning is first of all a surprise. You're like, oh my gosh, I was so happy. Everyone was crying, family members and stuff like that. And then he gets DQ'd, and you're like, oh, what? Like,
that hurts.
Now I feel less good.
Out of the playoffs, doesn't win. I'm like, man.
Yeah, and again, like to see Sage, like actually, I would love to point out something small that I don't know if everyone really caught this, but there was and again, you'd have to go back and look at this, but I don't think it was the last accident, but there was an accident coming onto the front straight in the tri-oval.
Hmm.
And Sage, I looked at Sage. Sage was involved. Like he spun around, but like he had to dodge a few different cars at very high speed. And it honestly, it was one of the most impressive things that I've seen out of Sage, because again, a lot of the times when those stock car accidents happen, you see people just get to the brakes, just try to slow down. And sometimes you think, well, why didn't they like turn to avoid that other car? Because again, you never know. Sometimes the best idea is literally just when stuff is when the whole world is collapsing in front of you, you just go straight. You know what I mean? Or you just
Punch
go
it.
and not necessarily like hit the throttle, but like literally just be like, okay, I'm going to make as few movements as possible because everything else is changing around me. But Sage went for I'm going to dodge everything. And it was actually like you'd have to go through and look at the slow mo because he still ended up like getting hit and spun a little bit. But obviously, the car was still in decent shape at the end of the race. The nose was a little bit up, but he dodged like four different cars at high speed and missed. And it was one of the most impressive things that I've seen. And again, it kept his car in contention because if you just kind of plow through the grass and maybe hit a bunch of people, you're still there, but maybe not as fast as you could have been. And yeah, that Xfinity race was a crazy one to watch at the end. And again, thought Allmendinger was going to get it after he was involved in accidents as well again.
Yep.
But yeah, just a crazy weekend map. But as is Daytona, Daytona
Right.
is just a wild one all across the board.
Yeah. So crazy. Super speedway
Crazy
racing
weekend
is
of
always
motorsport.
right. Always kind of a little bit of a crapshoot, but they're going to Darlington this weekend. Cup Series is first round of the playoffs. I think Southern 500 for them. I want to say Xfinity's running too.
I believe they are.
I
Yes, I
believe
just
they
saw
are.
some car liveries being. Looks like there's some interesting throwback liveries being run. I see the 44 car and the 45 car in Xfinity having some very very beautiful schemes.
Oh,
The Alpha Prime cars. Yeah, those look great. But yeah, I'm excited for to see the playoffs begin, to see the heat get turned up a little bit on everyone. But yeah, we're kind of gonna cut this episode a little bit shorter than normal because Joey's obviously not here. We don't have a race to talk about IndyCar wise, but we we wanted to make sure that we had a show, and Ben and I got on here, and we wanted to make sure that people knew that guess what? Yes, IndyCar is racing this weekend. We got Portland. And we're excited for it. We're going to have another show next week as well, and before the season finale. So yeah, it's gonna be an exciting couple weeks, and we had a great weekend off. Went to my uncle's wedding, family wedding, very exciting time. Joey had a kid. I mean, a lot happened in
you
between
cut the
our
mullet.
last episode. Yeah, the mullet is
The
gone. I
mullet's
guess we should
gone.
discuss that a little bit. Um, a lot of people, I've got a lot of negative responses, but also a lot of positive responses. I think that it was very interesting to tell the story of the mullet. I cut it in secret and I did not tell anyone. I actually got it cut literally after we recorded the episode last week. And it was just time. I thought to myself, I was like, you know what? It's time to try another thing. And for the scientific research side,
Right.
I
Right.
actually wanted to see if it helped cool me down in the car a little bit because I've been struggling so much with the heat in the race car. Maybe if I take a layer off my head, it'll help out a little bit. So we changed up the hair. I surprised my girlfriend with it as well. She did not. She was like, "Whoa, your hair's gone." I said,
Has she
"Yep."
seen you without the mullet?
No, she has not.
Oh
She has
man.
really only known. Well, she met me when I didn't have a mullet, but
Hmm.
that was years ago now. So recently it was a new thing. My mother looked at me like she was so proud because my mother was not a fan of the mullet. My mother was not a fan at all. And I immediately put a suit on. I look like I look like someone said that I looked like I was about to go sell insurance.
I can see
Which
it. I can see
you know
it.
what? We got a clean cut, ready to sell you the best deal you've ever got.
No money down.
But yes, it was time for the molt to go, and everyone seems happy. I feel better. I feel good. Feel like I'm ready to start a new chapter again. But also, yeah, also just hilarious to see how people react to it. I think that was, one of the funniest one of the funniest things ever.
Yeah, I thought Twitter was about to blow up when everything, and we talked about that in our little vlog before the download. I don't know. It'll come back. It always comes back. All good things come to an end, but it'll be back.
Exactly. The thing is hair grows back for most
Yep.
people. You know what I mean? Some people struggle with hair growth, obviously, but for me right now, we're gonna try this out, and maybe if it gets cold in the winter again, we go back to the warm haircut with a lot of coverage in the back. So I'm gonna be going back to putting sunscreen on my neck now. We're gonna be a red neck again, like literally. But yeah, a lot happened in the last week, but we're definitely ready to get back to normal racing.
Yeah, love it. Well, do you want to wrap it up with our Ricky Treadway Indy 500 driver of the week?
Yes, yes, we will get into the random Indy 500 driver of the week. Um, I went slightly more recent this year. We went with the 1982 Indy 500. So this is the year before my dad. My dad got to race the Indy 500. Gordon Johncock won this one. Gordon Johncock, legendary driver, obviously. What's interesting about this is I typed in 1982 Indy 500, but it says USAC Gold Crown Series race number 6 of 6, Sunday, May 30th, 1982, but it says the 1981 Indianapolis 500. So if there's for some reason a problem on the internet, and this is actually the 1981 Indy 500, I don't care. Sometimes the internet is confusing. Everything, it says 1982, May 30th, but it also says the 1981 standings. So either way, we're going to learn something new. We're going to go with the 17th place finisher, Michael Chandler. Michael Chandler. I don't know if I'd heard this name before. Michael Otis Chandler. Raced in the 1980-1984 seasons, 9 career starts, only 9. A near head-on crash in practice for the 1984 race left him in a coma for several days and prematurely ended his career. So that's not great. But again, in that era, my gosh, people were crashing hard left and right. So yeah, finished in the top 10 twice, best finisher 4th in 1981 at Riverside. So learned a little bit about, Michael Chandler. And that's our random Indy 500 driver of the week. So Ben, we appreciate you being on here. Appreciate those folks listening. Do send Joey Molinaro some congratulatory tweets, some congratulatory messages on the birth of his child. He is on maternity week. He is
full dad mode.
Full dad mode. Probably, changing diapers and making sure the wife is happy. I assume, that's what happens. The wife's out here doing a lot of work. I assume that's a hard process to birth a child. And all credit to the ladies out there birthing children, and respect the heck out of you guys. And yeah, we're excited for next week. Again, potentially a great guest, very, very high profile guest next week, potentially. So we'll hopefully convince him to do that with us. So thank you everyone for listening. We appreciate it. Follow us on all the social media channels. Tune into the race this weekend, NBC at Portland. It's sometime in the afternoon. Who knows? 2 o'clock, 3 o'clock. We'll see what happens. But it's going to be a great weekend in motorsports. So we'll talk to everyone next week on Speed Street.